Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Simon here. We've got Max again. Nice to see you.
Hi, everyone.
Sorry. Excellent. So we're just testing to see if it all looks and sounds good. So thank you, Kent. It does. Brilliant. Thanks for being our technical QA again. So officially, oh, hi, Mads. Officially, I'm Simon Walker. I'm Director of Training at Maxon. And this is Max, who is one of our expert trainers, who is... you're just outside Frankfurt, Max, aren't you?
Exactly. I'm in Friedrichsdorf.
Yeah.
Just a couple of kilometers from Frankfurt.
Excellent. And I'm greeting you today from Portland in Oregon. So we're multi-continent today. And hello again to Simon from sunny Shetland. So all over the place.
Nice.
Great. Okay, so a quick message from Green. He's not getting the presenter's audio. So just a double check before we get going. Can everyone hear both our audios?
What about mine?
I can hear.
Hello.
Okay, it's all good. All right. Okay, just wanted to double check. Thank you. It's always worth doing this. Great. Yeah. So today we are going to be covering a range of things inside. In fact, what are we covering today, Max?
Today we'll be talking about noise management in Magic Bullet Suite, and also we'll be looking into creating cinematic look fast using Magic Bullet Suite. So we'll be looking into some tools in Magic Bullet Suite such as Denoisers, Mojo, Cosmo, and Film. And if we have time, we'll squeeze in Renoiser as well.
Excellent, excellent. And the beauty of these weekly sessions is, of course, if we ever run because we are chatting about questions you ask, then we can always add it in on the following week. Exactly. And on that note, just as a reminder, the same landing page that you've been used to using for signing up for the various sessions for the last 2.5 months, which I will share this link again, and you get it automatically, of course, as part of the email follow-up, but we're adding to it from next week. So right down the bottom here where it says July, where we're on this section now, July the 20th, removing video noise and crafting cinematic treatments. Expect to see in the next couple of days here a full schedule for August and September. And so we are covering post-production in compositing and coloring compositing and color channels, and also compositing with after you do keys and how do you do light wrap and all the sorts of things that you typically find tricky or problems in the same style that we've been doing over the last number of weeks. So that's August, where we're inviting in 2 experts, which I'll tell you all about that next week. And then in September, we are talking again about Cinema 4D with all sorts of 3D workflows too. So full information on that coming up. But I just wanted to encourage you to visit back the blog page where we'll have lots more to share with you. And I will even put this inside the link. There we go. Great. So let me switch over my screen to you, Max, and then we can get started with this. And as always, everyone, please feel free to ask questions, because that's the whole thing about these demystifying sessions, where we're encapsulating lots of things that we think you'll find useful into this hour, but also be able to point you to more information as well and give you a route through to be able to contact us.
Yeah. Can everyone see my screen all right and hear my audio all right?
Yep.
Perfect. So thank you everyone for attending. Last 2 weeks, we've been talking about color corrections. So for the first week, we've been talking about the primary color corrections. And then last week, we've been talking about the secondary color corrections. We've come to know that primary color corrections is the color corrections that not targeted to a specific part of the image. It's literally the corrections where we focus on fixing the exposure, bringing our contrast to a good level, and so on. And last week, we've been focusing on creating a targeted corrections to a very specific part, some specific target in the image. And we've been doing that by using the qualifiers in Colorista. We're using the keyer to establish our qualifiers. But what we didn't include last week is that we actually can also do the secondary corrections without the keyer. So not all secondary corrections is calling out for the use of the keyer. Today, before we move on into looking into noise and creating some cinematic look, let's rewind back and let me show you some secondary corrections that not necessarily need the use of keyer. So for example, here, this is actually a clip from Euro Cup, right, Simon?
Well, this one is some footage from the UK Premiership League from a previous season.
Okay. Yeah. So for example, in this clip, I have like 3 instances of Colorista. The first instance of Colorista is just bringing the contrast level to a good level. So let me show you from the scratch. We can apply Colorista by using, we can search for all the tools in Magic Bullet by tapping in Bullet in the effect control panels there. And then you can just drag and drop Colorista to the control panels. And for this clip, let me just bump the highlight, bump the midtones a little bit and keep the highlight intact. In fact, I will reduce the highlight just slightly. So normally when we want to do the secondary corrections, we can launch the keyer using this button over here, key, edit, and you see the keyer. But in this particular clip, let us do secondary color corrections without using the keyer. To do that, we can use the Hsl wheels. The wheels over here on the left is controlling your hue and saturations, while the wheels on the right controlling the hue and then the luminance. So for this particular clip, so what commonly done in the sport broadcast is that normally you want to highlight one particular team, and we can do that using just Colorista in this instance. And for instance, if we want to desaturate everything and just focus our attentions to the red team or the blue team, we can simply just drag the color dots all the way to the middle of the wheels, because we know that by dragging it to the middles, we are desaturating it. And by dragging all the color dots except the red, we are actually desaturating all the colors except for the reds. And for the greens, we can just slightly drag it on the middle, 50%, because we don't want to reduce all the green in the clip, because it's a football match and a lot of the colors in the clip are green, the primaries. So you can also do the same thing by highlighting the blue team. Using the same method, you can also just drag all those color dots all the way to the middle of the wheels, and you got a fast color corrections for this type of look. And do you have any story behind this, Simon? Because I remember that you are doing this color corrections for the broadcast, right?
Well, yes, the whole idea of these is, as Max is saying, this is an interesting thing about this tool is originally designed to give you the ability to tweak a certain color, to actually desaturate something which stands out in the background too much, say a yellow or a bright red, so it's less distracting to the audience, or to actually then highlight a certain color and bring that and attract attention. But actually, if you use the pins all together, then you can nicely desaturate everything except one particular color, which is quite an interesting and useful technique. And what we found that on the last Euros that we ran in Paris, and also our previous World Cup that I was at in Brazil, the editors needed to do something really quickly and needed to be able to have different types of creative treatment without having to spend too much time doing it. And so a quick little way was to desaturate everything except, let's say, red and orange. And that gives you the ability to actually isolate everything, that all the cool colors, but also keep the skin tones intact. So it's a nice way of being able to do that and then stack up these effects on top of each other. And if you like, what I can do is I can just grab the screen quickly and just show you the process for this. Let's make me the presenter and show my screen and just jump over to Premiere and just give you a really quick indication of a couple of interesting things that you can apply to footage as well as sports treatments. So let's just throw on Colorista onto here. And by the way, if you're working with these HSL controls, if you click on this little icon to the right-hand side of where the hue and saturation controls are located, you can actually swipe up and down or left and right on these figures. So that if you wanted to not change the saturation, because it's easy to actually accidentally slightly move this to the left or right when you're manipulating it, you actually swipe these, and it gives you a good indication of which ones are going, the ones, which settings, if you like, are exactly 50% or 100% desaturated or oversaturated. And don't forget, by the way, even if you've got several of these set up, double clicking on a pin will reset that individual pin. You don't have to reset the whole effect if you make a mistake on one of these. But what I want to show you is this, that let's say that we desaturated a whole range of these colors like so, and we wanted to highlight, say, a team which was predominantly in warm colors. Then on the setups, we found that if we had the green at 100%, then it was a little distracting. It looked a little bit too odd. We found that had a little less of green, if you like, a little slight percentage, then helped to sell that idea where you could suggest that this was a stylized, especially a highlights package when you attract with a fast-paced couple of edits for a particular goal. And you can then stack these up on top of each other, because as we talked about before, the idea about having this as a series of effects that you can switch on and off is why Colorista was designed in this particular way. Oh, and by the way, you can use the strength slider here at the top of the control to actually change the strength from 100% to whatever percentage you need, which means that you don't then have to start treading around with taking different percentages in each section. You can do this as an overall control. And just a quick little workflow thing, if you right click and then save this as a preset, then you can save a whole bunch of presets for certain types of effects. And this is what we did. So if I just go into effects and go up to presets, I created a whole bunch of these things. Where are they? Here, Colorista for presets for different types of treatments. So if we wanted to do a bleach bypass on something, then it was a case of making those changes inside Colorista, and is typically increasing the pop value, so you got a little bit of a more sharpening, if you like, going on, and increasing decreasing the saturation slightly. And then if we wanted to remove that, you could then throw on something which was like, say, a sepia effect, and then also throw on a here we go, a vignette like so. And this is a concept that we hinted on last week, where you can then stack these up and then decide, well, actually you just need the sepia effect without the vignette, and turn it on and off, or vice versa, depending on how you want to work. And don't worry about how many of those you've got stacked up, because even if we've got multiple ones stacked up, they're still processing on the yellow bar, and then we get the real-time playback that you get inside After Effects and Premiere, because they're designed to stack up together like this. And we had, I think it was 5 or 6 effects, plus a real-time GPU accelerated limiter playing back on standard desktop machines on those tournaments and playing back in real time. So although we are next week going to be delving more into these kind of stylized treatments, and a little bit later on today actually, you can actually set that up with Colorista and use those tools, use those Hsl wheels and other settings, if you like, for stylized treatments rather than just technical color correction treatments. And if you like, what we can do is I can share this set of presets, because you can save it, left to right click, and you can export or import presets inside Premiere, of course. And that means if you do put all these in a folder, then they come in inside that folder, and then you can then have the same settings on different machines. So in fact, I'll do that. I'll make a note to actually include that in the project file downloads, just those series of easy and useful presets.
That's very kind of you,
question from
Simon.
Patrick. Well, it's no problem. I'm happy to share. Markers like goal and back pass, and how do I add them to a clip? Okay. What Patrick's talking about is these markers on the timeline. And basically, this is just a marker. If you add a marker, let's say I've wanted to add a marker to my clip, so you add a marker like so. Here we go. Standard marker. Notice, by the way, in Premiere, I'm adding a marker without having a clip selected. If I added the marker with a clip selected, and I'm using the marker menu, I'm using the menu so you can see this, but usually you just, of course, press the shortcuts, just press M and to create a marker. And if I created a marker with a clip selected, it adds it to that particular clip. But the point of these is, as I think you meant, Patrick, how can we get something nice written on them? Well, if you option drag on this particular marker, then you can open it up and then have it, oh, where is it? I'm not pressing the right one unless they changed it inside. Oh, there we go. Here we go. So that you option drag on the marker itself, that's where you can then have a ranged marker. And if I double click that, then we can type it and we can name it. So a range, there we go. So now that says the words range. And if you add this to a clip, then that will be available as a marker on that actual clip every time you put it on any timeline. So you can actually have a range set on your clip itself. And if we go into the markers panel, where is it? Markers here, then here we go. That's the range one, and you can jump in between markers and have those as separate marker areas depending on the what your name is or metadata you put into that. And also, if you, this has become Premiere Pro moment, but if you wanted to export all your markers, you can export those thumbnails with that content and the in and out points, and then have that in a PDF or an HTML file, which you can then save as a self-contained PDF. So that makes it easier if you wanted to share and that document and just get some feedback that way. Great. Okay, a couple of other quick questions. Can you share the whole presets to us? So useful, absolutely, Lee. I'll find out where the file is now and I'll post it in the chat box, and I'll also add that link into the email follow-up. And does every editor need to have colorists to use the presets? Yes, even though, thanks for that, Kent, even though they are Premiere Pro presets, they are actually, they require colorista to actually work. But you could work them with the trial version as well. So just to test out to see if that was working or that kind of effect worked for you. Great, and thanks from Patrick. Great, could you share how you save a stack of filters as a preset? Excellent. Question from Vinny, why not use DaVinci? Absolutely, if that's your workflow, then please do. Many sports setups use dozens and dozens of Premiere workstations, and they link to After Effects for that particular reason. But if you wanted to use DaVinci to do things like this, absolutely you can use that workflow. So we're just showing things that we have found useful, and then next week we'll look at how you can use Magic Bullet Looks in a DaVinci node too. So we are officially, even though I'm a certified Adobe Master Trainer, we're officially sitting on the fence and supporting multiple different workflows for different varieties of working.
Definitely.
So let's just show you if yes, that's always the case. So if we went into on this clip here, and then we go into effect controls and move this down here. If you wanted to have several different clips together as an effect, in fact, you can do this with the motion one. You can just command or control click on each of these, and whatever you've got selected here, then if you right click and save a preset, let's just save this preset, let's just call this July. If we just jump into effects here, and there it is. And so then if you've got that as an effect, you could then export that for saving as a multiple different settings. So that's some of the inherent motion settings in Premiere plus the colorist settings. And if you wanted to export multiple ones here, you can export multiple, select these, and then export multiple ones. But I've found if you put them in a folder, like so I did with this one, colors to presets, and then you right click on the folder and export it, then you contain everything within that folder. And if we export that presets, and then we have, let's just go on to here. untitled preset. Let's just choose to call this July preset. And then it saves it as this trips off the tongue, a PRF preset file. So that's the file extension for it, but it's something that After Effects, or rather Premiere, recognizes as a preset to save. Fantastic. Okay, here we go. Can you automate markers to change the looks? So if range 1 is a sepia look, that's a nice idea, but inside Premiere, the markers are set up as ranges of frames to be looking at, so that you couldn't necessarily change the effect by changing the markers. You still need to actually apply that to a certain range. I suppose if you wanted a range, the quickest way to do that would be an adjustment effect or adjustment layer. But that's an interesting one to be able to use that. Got it. Okay, I'm going to switch back to you, Max.
All right.
Let's just jump on here. So make you presenter for the next thing. And question from about, oh, here we go. Using Premiere and Resolve, does Red Giant support Resolve? Red Giant supports Resolve with Magic Bullet Looks, and you can save presets inside Premiere and open them up in the Resolve and vice versa, but not all of the Red Giant plugins currently support Resolve. We'll talk more about that when we get to Looks. And in fact, I might dig out the compatibility page on Looks for that. Universe is on Resolve. That's a good point. That's a good point. I was just thinking we are just thinking color correction today, but yes, we've got 80+ effects on Universe. So thanks for keeping me honest, Greg. Yes, of course we do.
Right. So yeah, that was secondary color corrections in a nutshell. And now let's move on into noise. I think most of us have seen and encountered digital noise on some form or whatsoever, right? If we go back and understand the exposure triangle, we can actually understand how noise was created, right? So when we are shooting, there are 3 elements that we need to take into considerations: the shutter speed, the aperture, and then the ISO. And there are trade-off in between of those elements. So the trade-off of shutter speed is the motion blur, and then the trade-off of the aperture is the depth of field. So the wider aperture you are using, the shallower depth of field. So you have background separations like what you see in the screen right now. And then the trade-off of using higher noise when you are balancing your exposure is the noise. So if you're using the higher the noise you are using, the higher the ISO number that you're using when you are shooting, most of the time you'll see a digital noise or whatsoever. It is because of the principle of the signal to noise ratio, right? It's like depends on how much the light is entering your sensor of your camera, and each of those signal need to be amplified by the sensor of your image. And if the amount of lights is not a lot, and meaning that the signal is not quite high, and that means that your sensor need to compensate that and need to amplify the signal. So the good metaphor is like if you are recording audio and you are whispering on your audio, and then in the post productions you try to amplify the recording, and you will hear the background noise. It's just the same principle, but using light. So here I have the 8-bit clip shot using the Canon 6D Mark II. We've known that this camera compressed a lot, and I use high noise, high ISO in this shot, and we can really see the noise already. And when you are color correcting, especially when you are lifting up the shadow area, you will start to see some form of noise. Like here, let me just adjust my contrast. I'll get my contrast right a little bit. Yeah, and reduce my highlight just slightly. So, As you see, when I start to lift my shadow, let me zoom in, you can start to see that there are a lot of noise in the shot before and after. And in Magic Bullet Suite, to remove or reduce noise, we can use the Denoiser. And to use Denoiser, it is important to put Denoiser as the first effect in your effect chain. It is because you don't want to grade your noise, but you want to reduce your noise first and then establish your grade. And Denoiser is a very simple, a very user-friendly noise removal tools, and it only consists of 5 different sliders. It actually consists of just 2 different sections, denoising sections and then sharpening sections. So if we are going by default, it is applying 15 reduced noise and smooth colors. So if we are going to put that on 0, going to 0 that out, we can see that it's not doing anything. But as soon as we are using that slider, as you can see, the reduce noise slider is actually removing the noise in the Luma channel. And as you can see in the smooth colors sliders, when we are using that slider, we start to remove the color noise, the noise in the chroma channel. So if you can see in this particular area over here, and if I drag the slider up, and you can start to see that it starts to smooth out. And we also have the preserve details. And this, you can use this slider to preserve the textures in your clip. For example, if I want to preserve some textures of this image, of this clip, I can just simply drag it a little bit. Of course, if you are dragging it all the way up, it's like fighting up the noise removal. I mean, just use it slightly. I think that's the nice balance over there. And we also have the sharpening sections over here. So for example, in this clip, we see that the image is a little bit soft, and we can use the sharpening to sharpen the image a little bit. And you have your radius over here. So to my liking, I like to use smaller radius. So I'm just sharpening the sharp details on the image. I can do that by doing so. So, and as you can see, this is the before noise removal, and that's after noise removal. And what's nice with Denoiser is that it's Mercury playback optimized. So you actually can scrub to your timeline and still get a result. It has an adaptive playback, so you can play your clip, and as soon as you hit pause and you park the playhead, it starts to show the full resolutions of the effect. Simon, I cannot hear you.
Good old mute. You thought I'd be used to this by now. Can I interrupt you a second, Max, and just to show a couple of things?
Sure.
Before you finish this this piece off, I was just going to grab your screen and just show you a couple of things that I found useful about this. Let's just, here we go. Make me the presenter. Show my screen again. So a couple of things about that technique Max was just talking about. If you are using a denoiser, and let's just jump into, here we go, denoiser. The first thing is, notice this, you will turn the bar from yellow to red. So this is something that processes on the CPU rather than the GPU. And that's also important to note because this is an AI-based technology. And in previous versions of Denoiser, there were many more sliders than we have here. And then I remember a conversation with the engineers about, hang on, I want all my other sliders back. I want to be able to target noise in different areas. And the whole point about the engine behind Denoiser 3 is it does that for you. So I've had conversations with people who've been using this and the previous version, and once they've used this, they realized it was so much easier to work. But here's the concept, and I'm going to zoom in so you can see this noise pretty clearly. It's always a nice concept to ask you to look at compression on a compression delivered format like a webinar, but you should be able to see all this really horrible macro noise on this. This is another DSLR piece of footage. And this is it without any noise reduction, and the noise reduction settings by default are coming at 15 units each. And just to reconfirm what Max was talking about, the reduced noise slider just does the Y channel, so it's just doing the luma values. So even if I crank this up something crazy, you might be able to see, let's be zoomed in even more here, you might be able to see a few little color blotches. It's a little tricky to see at the best times anyway, but there's some small color blotches on here which are then addressed if you do the smooth colors slider, which then those even out a bit more. And that's the idea behind these two sliders. What you do is that you target the main noise here with the reduced noise, and then you bring up the smooth colors to actually then adjust for those other areas of noise. And what Max was talking about when he said the preserved detail, this brings up the texture of the underlying image. So best practice is to have these settings, these values, the noise and colors, on high values, and then to bring up the preserved detail, because this will stop your skin looking a little too plasticky in some cases. Yep. Great. So Ken can see the noise because I'm zoomed right in. We might get you to zoom right into your example in a second, Max, so we can see the before and after. And talking sure. Which, before and after on here. So before and then after. Notice what I'm doing this, by the way, the detail on the specular highlights on the jewelry and on her hair and on her eyebrows as well. So this, if I do before and then afterwards, there we go. So it's one of those things which is capable of saving your shot without having to spend too much time thinking about it or using it. By the way, the sharpen, the amount, and the radius works pretty much exactly like the unsharp mask inside Photoshop if you're using that. And that's what you can do if you wanted to bring up some of these details. Look, I'm immediately gone too sharp here. Let's go slightly back a bit. But then the before and the after for that makes it much more easy to see the effect. And if we just zoom out slightly like this, then which makes this macro blocking, which you can even see on a reasonably zoomed out at 150% versus what it's actually like. And what Max was talking about is about the scrubbing, is that on full resolution, if I set this to full resolution, because this is working with the AI and then scanning all the frames, and because of the nature of IBP frame compression, most of the video footage we're dealing with, then the engine has to do a lot of effort to be able to work with this. But I found that if you run Premiere on half resolution, so that's just that thing under pause back resolution versus playback resolution. If you run on playback at half and pause resolution at full, every time you stop, then you see the full resolution of the image, which you'll get if you go full screen or if you output to an external monitor. But if you wanted to have scrubbability and then be able to look at multiple frames, you don't have to turn this frame off, to turn the denoiser off. You can keep this on whilst you're working, which is sometimes important if you're sitting with a producer to try and give them a full sense of what it's actually going to look like. And a final little comment, I've seen there's a few questions, I'll look at those in a second. Final comment about that is that denoiser needs to be the very first effect on the toolchain because it talks directly to the video file. So if you wanted to then have colorista on here, then your color correction needs to be afterwards. So if we're doing something really simple, just like this was shot with really overly warm lighting, so just like slightly reduce the warmth of the lighting like so, and then, I don't know, go crazy with the highlights and turn this a bit cooler, something like that. Here we are. So then you still get the interesting playback capability because colorista is processing on the GPU whilst denoiser is doing the CPU stuff at the half playback resolution. So a couple of little workarounds to save you time processing before your final output. And it will work if you have colorista as the first effect in the stack, but not as efficiently. So the rule of thumb, always have denoiser the first effect on the stack. And a side use for this is if you're doing a lot of green screen keying, Denoiser can be a fantastic thing to actually make your keys better if you use that before you actually throw on something like Primat. So we've got, and so Primat is another one of the, oh, if I press it correctly, is another one of, here we go, Primat Key 6 is another Red Giant tool. And so if you've got the Red Giant complete subscription, then you get all the tools from the different suites. So I'm trying to keep my brain inside color correction and magic bullet mode. But if you were using that, then you can actually have the denoiser before the Primat, and it would actually give you a better key if you've got noisy footage in the background, which is often caused as well with low or shadows or low lighting, that sort of thing. Great. Quick question from Patrick: is denoiser or one of the effects of Magic this week capable of reducing flickering? Okay, so groups of flame flickering often have semi-professional drone footage midday coming in and removing that flickering. Horrible. Denoiser won't specifically move flickering, but Digital Anarchy does an excellent deflickering filter. So I'll see if I can dig out the link for that as well. But that's the one that I've seen works phenomenally well for doing that sort of thing. And also, if you've got lights flickering on and off, like strip lighting, sometimes can be really annoying for that. So the quick answer is that it can't do it in Magic Bullet, but Digital Anarchy deflicker could help you, Patrick. And here we go. Did I accidentally? Oh, I might have accidentally deleted somebody's question. Oh dear, I did. Sorry, that's a question after Kent's one. This is like a high frequency separation technique in Photoshop. Sort of, Kent. It's the idea is to blend those noisy macro blocking frames together whilst giving you decent control over the quality of the shot and save it and so on. Great. Okay, so I'm going to hand back to you, Matt. If you did post a question, by the way, and I hadn't answered it in the last 5 minutes, please repost it. I accidentally clicked on the delete button. It wasn't personal. Okay, this question from David. Let's switch over to Max whilst I'm answering that one. Here we go. Make you the presenter, Max. Question from David: If you have multiple GPUs, will Colorista make use of both of them, or is it like Premiere ignores the second GPU except during export? That is exactly what's happening, Patrick. If Premiere 2019 onwards and After Effects as well has the capability of seeing more than one GPU, then it will process it on export because that's how it's set up. But on the timeline, the official word is that it has one GPU actually as you're playing back. So yes, the answer is in your question, James, and I'll just say yes on that question board so that everyone should be able to see it now.
Right, cool.
Max, would you mind just on your previous shot, would you mind just zooming right in just so we could see the before and after? So go really crazy in. There we go. That's great.
That's it. So this is before the denoising, and after applying denoiser, of course you can see that.
So what settings have you got denoiser on that one?
Yeah, I have around 48 for the reduced noise and around 57 for the smooth colors.
Can you slide up to about 80 or 90 on reduced noise? And just so we can have a look at that and see the difference, because I want to make a point about processing, so that if you've got those set up like so, okay, and then do a before and after.
This is before.
Okay, so
and this is after.
Is it moving the background? Okay, and can you turn off the Colorista one as well, just so we can see what happens before you do it and before and after a grade? There you go.
There you go.
Great. So you're just lightening it up.
Exactly.
So the idea is the higher the noise, the more amount of processing the algorithm has to do. But if you keep it in the low 20s, if you can bear with that, and you just need to get rid of some of that noise in terms of just making it less obvious, it will process faster.
Exactly.
So that's kind of a little trick. I know it seems a bit obvious, like less intense settings is faster render, but that's something to be aware of if you've got like a 90-minute timeline that you need to export.
Yeah, and I also would like to point out that Denoiser can be also used in the log footage. For example, we have a log footage here, and let me just correct the contrast level there. This is a log footage, and I will just use the Arri log C LUT to bring the contrast just about correct.
So that's the built-in LUT built into Colorista, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is the built-in LUT that's shipped with Colorista. And you can use this.
Your custom one, can't you?
Yeah, exactly. You can use this LUT to convert your color space. And for example, if I am try to lift up my shadow again, and you can start really see that the noise start to show. And I can use Denoiser to, again, tackle the amount of noise that I see in the clip, right? So maybe I have to zoom it a little bit. So this is before the denoising, and that is the after denoising. So what actually happened is
you can really see that on her skin tone. Sorry, Max, it's worth
exactly,
turning that off and on again a couple of times, because
exactly,
just concentrate on her skin tone next to her nose, then you can see
yes,
that's
in this
how
area.
especially those chroma values are being smoothed out.
And that is achieved by using the smooth colors, right? So by using the reduced noise, you can really see that the noise in the background got removed. And by using the smooth colors all the way up, you start to remove that color noise. And yeah, that's Denoiser.
We had a quick question from Turkey about what does each log LUT differ in? I'm guessing what you mean is how does each one change? So, or what effect does each one have when you are applying it to footage? So, Max, would you mind just opening up the Colorista section and just opening up that list of LUTs at the bottom?
Yeah.
And the idea behind these LUTs is that some of them are technical ones, like the Arri log C and also the S-Log 2 and 3. They're especially useful for drone footage, by the way. I found that actually the S-Log 2 on some DJ drone footage is really great at being able to have vibrant saturation, and that's easier and faster than actually setting up manual curves. But the idea of these is to give you some technical adjustments, and also some of them, like the wonderfully named blood bag, are creative LUTs. So this in fact, that's a good question. Why are those range of LUTs in there, and what are they doing? Well, it gives you a quick reference to be able to do something which is built into Colorista, and that means that these settings will be the same if somebody else opens up your project. And also these LUTs these LUT processes are built into Magic Bullet Looks as well with the same names. But if you just open that up again, Max, some of them are like experiment, like you don't have to click on this, but so we can see the list, Max. But fall is here, identifies warmer orangey colors that you typically get in autumn. And the things like blood bag is mostly based on the reddish colors that were in the recent Mad Max film. And tranquility, and also Maxine tends to highlight more cooler colors. So they're different processes that really are creative effects that you can combine with footage. But I think the most important button in this entire list is the import LUT one right at the bottom, where you can use a specific LUT from the camera or from the shoot that then will adjust largely the amount of the effect of the footage.
Right.
Great. Anyway, sorry, Max, please carry on. I was just
no problem. So yeah, that is Denoiser. I think let's move on to next stuff, which is we will be talking about creating cinematic look fast in Magic Bullet Suite. So in Magic Bullet Suite, we know that first of all, when we want to create something cinematic, means that we just want to resemble the look of some motion picture film, for example. You can do that starting from your shooting phase. For example, you using the cinematic lighting, cinematic directing, and so on and so forth. But in today's sessions, let us just focus on the color grading sections point. So for example, in this clip, we can apply Mojo from Magic Bullet Suite. So what actually Mojo is doing is it is cooling down the shadow while retaining, warming up the midtones and highlight. And by default, Mojo will use the preset Mojo and with Mojo amount of 50%. And using preset is a good way to start using Mojo, because those presets are actually only affecting all the available parameters inside Mojo. So light would be just small amount of Mojo. Mucho will be lots of Mojo. And such as Optimus, you probably already can guess from which film it was inspired. And then fluorescent is a nice one because it is using the Mojo tint slider. So we have a Mojo tint slider here. If you use this Mojo tint slider all the way to the right, and you can start to introduce the green tint on your clip. Meanwhile, if you drag it all the way to the left, it's start to add that magenta tinge to your clip. And another nice preset is also this one, handmade, because it's using this faded slider. It is actually lifting up your shadow area if you try to focus on the scopes. And as I am dragging the faded, as you can see, it's lifting up the shadow. And another nice preset is the noir, because it's using the bleach it slider over here. So if you drag bleach slider all the way up, maybe to 200, you start to desaturate your image, and all the way to the left, you start to saturating your image. So let us establish some good looks on this clip. So for example, I'll just use Mojo and then apply a Mojo tint slightly there. And you can use punch it slider to manage your contrast level. All the way to the right, this will be too contrasty, maybe slightly over there. And yeah, let's fade it a little bit. So the idea of Mojo is to create a good looking image fast. So you can use Mojo to color grade your multiple clips, and you can simply establish your style using Mojo here. And then once you copy and paste Mojo to another clip, as you can see, we have the corrections sections over here. You can use the correction sections to balance multiple clips when you are using Mojo. So for example, if I am opening this multi-view here over here, and
by the way, it's worth just mentioning, if anyone hasn't seen this is the ability to see multiple different frames on the same timeline, which was introduced in a couple of versions of Premiere ago. So could you just turn that off and on and show everyone where the button is, Max?
It is right over here under my timeline. It is because I added over here. If you don't see this in your Premiere Pro, you can simply just click add and add the multi comparison view to your timeline over there.
So useful. I love that effect.
Yeah. So there are two sections of Mojo. The first one over here is the styling sections. You can use it to establish your look. And then the second section is the corrections. You can use this to balance your clip when you are using Mojo. So for example, in this two clips, I can just add a warmth a little bit, and then fix the skin tone just slightly right over there. So by using Mojo, when color grading, you can really save time, because you can just easily create a look and then copy paste it to multiple clips, and you can balance it using the correction sliders over there.
It's such a useful tool. In fact, I've got a couple of, as you probably guessed, I've got a couple of examples that I wanted to show as well, to pick up from what Max was saying. So I'm going to grab the screen from you, Max.
Yeah, sure.
And also answer that question that you may have been thinking, well, hang on, can't you do all that stuff inside the color correction wheels? Why do you need a specific set of sliders? Aren't you reinventing the wheel with Mojo? Why just have this with sliders in it? Well, this is the whole reason or the philosophy behind some of these tools in that we make at Red Giant. And the idea is that it enables you to do, as Max said, things more quickly. So the inherent conceit of Mojo is that Mojo takes images and adds contrast and blue greens to the shadows and exaggerates the skin tone slightly, and the further you go, the more crazy your film gets. Great. So and you can do that with color wheels, but it's so fast to be able to just scrub this and do it in one kind of instruction with sliders, and then use this in multiple different hosts and be able to get places more quickly. So it's using the same color science, it's still doing 32-bit processing, it's still GPU enhanced, you still get a yellow bar in your timeline, but it's just a faster way of doing it. And you can see on as I'm dragging this, what the colors are doing. They're stretching out and putting on the Vectorscope. They're pushing down towards that green, blue, teal area. So the whole concept is that skin tones have some orange in them. Every single skin tone does. And then there is, if you balance that with blues in the background, then you have complementary saturation going on. And these are techniques that the famous artists have been using for centuries, since the Renaissance, to be able to make images look nicer. And so this is also why all movies look the same these days. Maybe they're slightly more blue if they're sci-fi, slightly more green if they're horror, but you kind of get this exaggeration.
So
but anyway,
Teal on orange.
Yes, exactly that. I'm leading up to something, by the way. This is just all background information. By the way, inside Mojo, or what Max was pointing out is the fact that you can identify what type of footage you were using. So if you were using log, then it can then access the fact that that was log footage. So let's just reset here, just choose, I know this was log footage, and this is 4K footage, by the way. If we then had 0 Mojo on here, you see some of the original colors, and if we drag it up here, you've got that exaggeration of contrast, and so you've got these shadows which are then impacting on the surface, if you like, then being crushed, so we're losing detail. So that classic look. But something I really like Mojo for is its ability to work with a non-blockbuster movie look, and that's with those 3 sliders: the punch it, bleach it, and fade it. Those technically incorrect named sliders. So punch it gives you more contrast, or less contrast. Bleach it then takes out that saturation, and then fade it, as Max was saying, brings up those shadow levels, which you can see on the scopes here. But just doing this simple little instruction is so great for creating a kind of faded film look. So that here's the before and after. Well, actually, I should have been zeroed this out and showed the log to do in precise before and after. But you'll get the idea, is that you can then quickly experiment with those things without having to spend too much time working out where all the colors are. And then inside the corrections area, then you can start really playing around with it and then having something which is cool or warm. So if you wanted something which was more dramatic for the emotional drama, or if you wanted something that was warm because it fitted in with the rest of the film, you can do that sort of thing, even though you're not using any of the base Mojo that originally this was designed for, because it's at a 0 setting. You're using those sliders for quick little filmic routines. So I really like that. And the other thing to bear in mind when you're doing this is that although you can stack this with different effects, and you can very easily stack this with Colorista and Magic Bullet Looks, it's possible to do quick little color correction treatments and techniques and adjustments all within Mojo. Because let's say, for example, for argument's sake, I wanted to make something which was Mojo-y, and then I copied this effect. Here we go, copy, and then I wanted to paste it onto another couple of shots that we got on the timeline. And let's just like paste it here. And you could also do a paste attributes if you're working on inside Premiere, of course. But although we've got the same color here going on, use the split window, same color of her top inside these 2 shots together, great. When we come to this 3rd shot, then it's dramatically different because the lighting inside the car is obviously different. But what you can do is jump into the correction section and increase the exposure. But notice this, the colors are staying or honoring each other from frame to frame. So all we're doing here is we're bringing up those values, Luma values. Notice on the Vectorscope, we're not significantly changing those colors. So just a little trick. You've got several clips on the timeline. You want to get some sort of filmic treatment, and you don't really have time to mess around too much, or you've got 8 minutes before your deadline and you want to make it look interesting, but also balance those shots together. So that's a nice kind of usage of these correction sections inside Mojo. Cool. So how are we doing on time? Well, we're almost there on time, as always.
Almost there. Can I show one more thing on Mojo?
Of course, yes. I'll chuck the screen back to you.
All right, thank you, Simon.
Greg's asking, is the quality sacrificed? And the quick answer to that is any color correction will slightly affect your image. But I would say that using Mojo, then you are not going to affect it any worse than you are with any of the other tools, because you're doing multiple corrections, and those sliders are doing very similar corrections as if you were doing that with a set of color wheels or curves. So the answer is both yes and no. Yes, if you do an extreme correction on highly noisy footage, then the more corrections you make on the more macro blocking you got in the footage, you're exposed that underlying noise, or if it's being reconverted several times, you can expose the underlying codec, if you like. So, but it's pretty safe to use Mojo in these ways because they're designed in the same way, the same color science that we're using for some of the rest of the tools like Colorista. A question from Nut Richard, which is, I'm not sure which is your first name, so I'm sorry, but are these based on 8-bit or 10-bit processing? It's all based on 32-bit, because when you apply this effect inside Premiere or After Effects, then it creates a 32-bit environment for that color correction. And even if you've got 8-bit footage, you can then be grading inside 32 bits because that's the nature of it. And if you then output to say a 8-bit, or sorry, a 10-bit or 12-bit, you still get that 32-bit quality processing before then it's output to 10 or 12 bits. And a quick question from David, do any of the current control surfaces work with Colorista and Lux? And the recommendations that some there will look, I have to have the ripple, this wasn't planned, but I've got the tan ripple on my desk because that's the one. I've also got a wave as well kicking around here. Currently we don't support control surfaces, but it's been such a popular request and question so that we are looking at it. But that's a great question, David. Over to you, Max.
Right. All right, thanks, Simon. Oh, okay. So the other sliders that I really want to show you is this blue squeeze and skin squeeze, because it's such a fun sliders to play around. So what these sliders are doing is the blue squeeze is actually unifying your blue. So if you slide it all the way up, you can see that the value is moving in the Vectorscope down there. So if you unify all the blue, and then you use the Mojo tint slider, you can change the hue of the blues in your image, right? And by using the skin squeeze, you kind of also doing the same thing, but for your skin. So you can unify your skin, and then by using the skin yellow pink sliders, you can park your skin to the closer to the eye bar. If you see the Vectorscope, I can bring all the skin tone colors close to the correct area over there, right? So that is Mojo. Mojo is all about getting a good look fast. And before we're running out of time, let me just quickly show you another tools in Magic Bullet Suite that you can use for creating nice skin tone, because major part of creating a cinematic look is a good skin tones. And in Magic Bullet Suite, we have a dedicated tool for that, and that is Cosmo. And if you drop Cosmo to your clip, at first nothing is happening, but that's because we have to sample our skin first. To do so, you can simply just click the eyedropper, and select the skin, which is falling in the mid-tone area. It's not in the shadow or not in the highlight, but in a even area. So let's pick up something over here. And you have the options to show your matte, and you have two sliders to fine tune the selections. So you have the selection offset to change the hue. As you can see in the Vectorscope, it's moving the hue. And then the selection tolerance is changing how broad the selection is, your selection is, right? So we have three different parts, different sections in Cosmo, which is the skin selections we have already done. We've just did. And the second one is the skin smoothing. And the third one is skin color. In skin smoothing, we can smooth out the complexions of our skin. And we can do that by using the skin smooth slider over there. So, and normally when we are smoothing our skins, the result can look really flat if we smooth it too much. And we can counter that by using the preserve detail and sharpen texture. It's bringing back that complexions back to your shot. So for example, if you see in the screen, by sliding the preserve details, I can get back the details in my skin tone and also the sharpen texture. The other thing is preserve contrast. You can use the preserve contrast to maintain the contrast in your skin tone, such as the shadow area and then the midtone and the highlight area as well. And by default, in the skin color, it is applying the 50% of value. What it's actually done is actually bringing your skin tone closer to the eye bar over there. So if you move it to the left, you kind of change the value. If you notice that value in the eye bar in the Vectorscope, right? And another nice tips here in Cosmo is that you can actually use Skin Unify. You can use Skin Unify to actually unify the skin tone. For example, if you have patches, blotches in your skin, you can use the Skin Unify to even out. So for example, in this male talent, let me just define the skin selections. And since it's a male talent, I don't want to smooth the skin too much. Maybe just put it in 0 on restore noise, and then 0 on sharpen texture. So as you can see, he has slightly red skin tone on his nose. And to unify that, you can simply just use the skin color unify slider, pump it up a little bit, and then you can start to use the skin selection offset, maybe there. So that's without Cosmo. And let me zoom in.
You added a contrast onto this shot with Colorista, a little bit of contrast before processing Cosmo, then you exaggerate that effect. But yeah, what Max is pointing out is that both inside Mojo and Cosmo, you have got settings which target skin tone, and then also can adjust the color, and in this particular case, smooth out that all the colors across the face, where he's got a slightly redder tinge on the bridge of his nose on his cheeks, and then you can have a similar color across the whole face. And it's interesting. On some shots you might not need color correction, or you might not need smoothing, but it might just be something that's a request from the talent, or it might just be that you want to have an adjustment for lighting or attract attention to a different area of the frame. So these are small little subtle effects, but the takeaway is that although we showed you how you can target things using the keyer inside Colorista, inside both Cosmo and inside Mojo, you've got the capability of being able to do these things semi-automatically because although we target, the Max showed he was targeting the skin sample with an eyedropper, it's a faster way of working, and you can then change the smoothing settings and also some of the color correction settings.
Not to mention that Cosmo work well with Mojo as well. So simply just drop Cosmo, pick up skin selections, define your skin selections, and just drop Cosmo. You got instant look fast.
That's true, and that's also an answer to the previous question about, do you reduce the amount of quality that when you're stacking up these effects? And the answer is no, because as we've had a flurry of questions about the 8-bit versus 32-bit, depending on what your footage is, and it's the way that the effects process when they're on the timeline inside Premiere. And it's not just the Magic Bullet. Premiere has some inbuilt effects that process in 32-bit as well. And there's also a question there about working with proxies, and does that going to be messing around with your color correction, color space, and what you've got available to play with? Well, in terms of the bit depth, you can, if let's say you were working in ProRes and where you had the actual file size was smaller, but you can still get 10-bit ProRes proxy files from larger ones. You could still get a very close approximation of what you're doing on the timeline with proxies. But of course, the absolute test is to switch that over using the proxy button inside Premiere to actually the full finished version, or the full files, if you like, just as a check. But again, the sitting on the fence answer is you can get pretty much most of the way there, but make sure that you actually do a final test before you actually output. So making the whole process much faster.
Do we have time for Magic Bullet film?
We don't. So what we're going to do is we're going to, surprise, shocker, we overran, but we do have the capability of putting that in next week. And so I think that will fit in nicely with Looks and Denoiser in next week's section. So
yeah, not to mention that Mojo and Magic Bullet film can also be found in Magic Bullet Looks as well.
That's why, yes, absolutely, yes, and Denoiser too. So I think that's why this going to fit in nicely into that session. Yeah, so that's a good point, Max. By the way, another plug for this kind of library of quick little 20-second tutorials. The link will be in the email. Just search for me under YouTube. But I just wanted to point out down here, if you wanted, just as a memory jogger, retro film looks with Magic Bullet Mojo, then that's exactly what I was just showing you a few seconds ago about the ability to turn on Mojo and then have it across multiple different frames, and also set up retro effects by bringing up the fade it slider. But as Kent pointed out earlier, it would behoove me to also plug the 3D motion show that we've got coming up Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday this week, which is completely open and free, that you can then view artist-focused presentations from a variety of fantastic artists on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, starting at 8:30 a.m. Pacific time. So that's 4:30 if you're in the UK. And then there's information about all the artists over Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So 3dmotionshow.com is going to be hugely useful, I think. And very entertaining as well, because these are people who are using these techniques in real life on actual projects. So we have as well, but there are people who are doing this and sharing what they worked on live stuff. Fantastic, great. So don't forget to sign up for next week on the blog post. Here we go. Where is it? Here it is under the webinars. We've got some more ones coming in August and September, and we will have them in October and that sort of thing, because as you probably guessed, we're getting quite used to doing these sessions on a Monday. So it's been lovely also hearing your comments, and then it helps guide and craft where we're going with them. Great.
So yeah, next week we will try to focus on using Magic Bullet looks, and we'll try to emulate some looks from film as well.
Yes, that's another question that came up. Can you identify a certain look from a film and then go about how you might recreate that? So yes, we'll absolutely do that. That's a very fun thing to do.
Sure.
Great. So Also, one other thing here is that, did we put the email address in here? I thought we did. If you've got any follow-up questions, or if I didn't answer your question, far enough, training@maxon.net, and please feel free to catch up with us. Great. So thanks for bearing with us. Thanks for letting us overrun again.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Max. All right. Brilliant. And thanks for all the kind comments. Really, really appreciate it. All right. See you next week. Right. Bye.
Bye-bye.